and thank you for joining us for our session titled Trending Issue: Meaningful Research Includes Patients at the Table. My name is Suzanne Ruff, and I'm pleased to introduce this panel session. Professionally, I've been a freelance writer for the Charlotte Observer, and I'm the author of the nonfiction book, The Reluctant Donor. I am a member of the AAKP National Board of Directors, serving as the association's treasurer. I am also a living kidney donor. In my family, over 20 loved ones have battled or are battling a genetic disease called polycystic kidney and liver disease. The disease has claimed the lives of 11 family members, including my mother and a few short months ago, one of my sisters. I am the only sibling who did not inherit kidney disease. People ask me if I feel guilty about that, but I had nothing to do with my genetic makeup. But I do feel a great responsibility, which is why I became involved with AAKP, as did my father 40 years ago. I am obnoxiously passionate about kidneys and supporting families facing rare or genetic conditions which cause kidney failure. I am a staunch advocate for organ donation and living donation for at this point in time, and hope for artificial kidneys in the near future. I often say, when a person has kidney disease, the family has kidney disease. As a family member and living donor, I have had the great opportunity to represent AAKP on various research projects, including being a co-investigator on the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute's project, putting patients at the center of kidney care transitions, also known as Prepare Now. Our work on this project was from 2015 to 2020, and it was an honor to know and work with the patients and other family members like myself. I've also been a key contact for companies supporting AAKP activities, and as a kidney disease subject matter expert on the AAKP Speakers Bureau. More recently, I had the honor of being one of the authors of the article published entitled Engaging Patients and Family Members to Design and Implement Patient-Centered Kidney Disease Research. Over the last 5+ years, AAKP has invested heavily in grassroots and virtual technologies to help patients and their families engage decision makers, researchers, scientists, and other influencers through our Center for Patient Engagement and Advocacy and our Center Patient Research and Education. Through our strategic partnerships with government, academia, and industry, we have been able to connect tens of thousands of new patient voices and their unique patient insights to those responsible for making informed decisions that impact some of the most vulnerable, ill, and underserved populations in the country. AAKP is building our capacities to better organize patients, address inequities, and to make certain patients have an even greater impact on issues related to care choice and innovation. Throughout the speaker presentations, it will demonstrate that AAKP is leading the way in engaging kidney patients, like you listening, across the disease spectrum in meaningful research and introducing you to a number of researchers and professionals who know the true meaning of patient engagement. It is more than a check off the box. It's the ability to put the independent patient voice at the research and policy table where it rightly belongs to drive a far larger and more representative number of patients in efforts that are already shaping the future of kidney disease treatment and public policy. So, to begin our session, I will briefly introduce all our speakers collectively and then welcome them to present one by one. Please join me in welcoming Melissa West, Senior Director for Strategic Relations and Patient Engagement with the Alliance for Kidney Health at the American Society of Nephrology. Dr. Claudia Dahlerus, Assistant Research Scientist, University of Michigan, Division of Nephrology and Internal Medicine, Kidney Epidemiology and Cost Center. Dr. Elisa Gordon, Professor of the Department of Surgery, Division of Transplantation, Center for Health Services and Outcomes Research, and Center for Bioethics and Medical Humanities at Northwestern University, Feinberg School of Medicine, where my family had 7 transplants. Dr. Wendy L. St. Peter, Professor at the University of Minnesota College of Pharmacy, and lastly, Christine Broderick, Engagement Officer with the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute. Melissa, I turn it over to you.
I would like to thank AAKP for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Melissa West. I am Senior Director of Strategic Relations and Patient Engagement at the ASN Alliance for Kidney Health. And I'm here to talk to you about a new project that we're working on to incorporate patient preferences into the development of novel kidney replacement therapy. So just to level set everyone, the Kidney Health Initiative is a public-private partnership between the American Society of Nephrology, the Food and Drug Administration, and the kidney community. It was established in September of 2012 to catalyze innovation in the development of safe and effective patient-centered therapies for people living with kidney disease. There are more than 100 member organizations, again, across a swath of stakeholders, both industry, patient groups, the healthcare professionals that make up the Kidney Health Initiative as the largest consortium in kidney disease. Our federal partnership, as mentioned, is with the Food and Drug Administration, and we have the opportunity to work across the Center for Drugs, the Center for Biologics, the Center for Devices, and the Center for Food Safety. In addition, we also have the opportunity to work with Centers for Medicare, Medicaid, NIH, and CDC. So in addition to the 100-member organization, we have our federal partners who are also critical to the success of all of our initiatives. So what I'm here to talk to you a little bit today is patient preferences and how best to collect them as a part of the device development process. So what is patient preference information? This is a qualitative or quantitative assessment of relative desirability or acceptability of patients. So this is thinking about alternatives or choice, amount of outcomes, or maybe different ways to think about your health interventions. So a patient preference information captures that value that patients place on the aspect of the device. We're trying to account for different perspectives on benefit and risk, and especially in the way that people use that device to treat their conditions. So patient preference information is not patient-reported outcomes. It is slightly different. So I thought it would be helpful just to kind of outline how a device comes to market. And so the schematic that is from dark orange all the way to green really is the total product life cycle of a device. So it starts from an idea, working through the invention and the prototyping, testing that in a preclinical setting, perhaps going back and changing the prototype before going back through testing into clinical trials, and then obviously a decision-making and a launch of that product. So it's a very systematic process that it takes in order to make sure that those devices are both safe, and that they work as the label says. What's also shown on this schematic is in those black boxes with the arrows is the places where patients can have an input into the development of that device. And you can see it along the whole product life cycle. What we're talking about today is over by that green area, what's called regulatory decision-making. And we're looking at this benefit risk information that we refer to often as patient preferences. So if you think about a patient preference study, this is a research method, right? We're trying to produce an estimate of available desirability or acceptability of a certain aspect of that device. So it is really systematic in nature. This is not just your preference in general for how you want your treatment to be run. This is really a very systematic way of understanding how you interact with that device. So potential attributes that might be looking at the benefit side of the device could be your ability to take fewer blood pressure medications or have fewer restrictions in your diet, really being thinking about how a device helps you have more dialysis free time. On the opposite side, there might be risks for that device, right? So there might be a higher risk of infection, or there might be a higher risk of complications of that device. And so the study itself is what's going to quantify or qualify that assessment of that individual patient or the population at large. So patient preference studies have already been used by the Food and Drug Administration and the Center for Devices in particular to think about making either approvals or label extensions of a device that's already on the market. The one that will probably be of most interest to our community is the Next Stage device. They did use a patient preference survey to get clearance for their hemodialysis device going, individuals being able to use it by themselves at home. This was an important study that took place and was able to allow individuals to be able to use that Next Stage device without their care partner. And there's been other examples as well in obesity and in ear infection, where a patient preference study really was able to take a total community that may be using that device and really identifying kind of a subset, if necessary, of individuals who are interested in more benefit, but also willing to take more risk for that device. So I want to talk a little bit about the actual activity that's happening right now in our community. We are focused at the Kidney Health Initiative with a team of looking at really integrating patient preferences into regulatory decisions for future dialysis devices. And our objective of the study or the project was really to think about a sustainable strategy for how we could collect this patient preference information, always from a representative sample of dialysis patients in order to think about future dialysis devices. And so our specific objectives are to think about both process, but also outcomes of the survey themselves. So we're piloting a survey that we've developed, and I'm going to tell you about today, to be thinking about both how the survey instrument is developed, how it is administered, or how it's fielded, but then also thinking about this infrastructure piece. How do we allow these surveys to happen more frequently, more often with the end consumers, yourselves as patients? So this is our team that's in place. Jenny Flythe at University of North Carolina Kidney Center and Michelle Tarver at the Center for Devices and Radiological Health at FDA are our primary investigators. We have a long list of clinical advisors, our subcontractor, RTI International, colleagues at both the Kidney Health Initiative as well as FDA. But I really want to point out our patients in particular who've helped us with this survey to date. Derek Forfang, as many of you may know, he is serving as our patient partner on the steering committee. And then we have additional patients in representatives in David White, Carolyn Wilkie, and Nelchi Gedney, who are also helping in terms of the survey actual development or implementation. So huge credit to this group of individuals who've been working on this since late 2019 and will continue through 22. So the scope of our survey is to understand a patient's maximal acceptable risk for a future wearable device. That wearable device could be a hemodialysis or a peritoneal dialysis. And we really we've scoped this to a wearable device just because these are probably more near term and more useful to the FDA. But there are obviously future iterations of dialysis that are coming, including implantable devices. We are comparing, because you always have to have a comparator in your study, we're comparing individuals' interest in a wearable device to their in-center dialysis experience. Individuals could fill out the survey in either English or Spanish. And again, as we're going back to really understanding that maximal acceptable risk, we have to pick some device attributes. We have to think about what elements that differentiate a wearable device from an in-center device. Could we actually better understand that risk-benefit analysis? And so we've picked the serious risk of infection and the serious risk of bleeding. And those two attributes did come after focus groups and discussions with patients to really understand which elements of the devices, the future devices, are of most interest to them. So we thank everyone who participated in that process for us. So our methodology is a complex one. I would say that for this group, I just wanted you to know we're using a threshold technique. We will be doing additional analysis to also be thinking about future clinical trials in this space. But I'll point you to the picture on the right, which is probably the easiest schematic to understand the methodology behind the survey. So again, we have our in-center comparator on the middle column, and we have the future wearable device, which we have described in the survey on the right side. And ultimately, through a series of questions, the individual who's completing the survey will choose which of the two options are of most interest to them. And so in this case, in this option, you have a 1% risk of, less than 1% risk of serious bleeding with an in-center device, and you have an 8% risk of serious bleeding with a wearable dialysis device. And patients are asked to switch. And because it's a threshold technique, those numbers continue to change until we ultimately get to the point where the patient says, too much risk, I wouldn't use that future device compared to what my experience was in center. It's just too much. And that's where their threshold kind of comes in. So our sampling and our analysis and eligibility, for those that are interested, we're looking to have 400 completed surveys. Again, what's most important to us is making sure that we get diverse and representative dialysis patient population. We really want to understand everyone's perspective or some segment of everyone's perspective in this survey so that we don't sway the future, the information in any way in terms of future device development. So we'll be looking at analysis to both understand the modality. So how do the in-center patients versus those that are currently on home hemodialysis or currently using peritoneal dialysis, how do they identify that maximal acceptable risk? We'll also be looking to understand, for those that have only been on dialysis for less than a year, what's their acceptable risk versus those who have maybe been on dialysis much longer. We'll be looking at age and then also be thinking about it in the Spanish-speaking and English-speaking populations. So your eligibility to be able to take this survey is that you must be in the United States, you must be 22 years or older, you must have ESKD or currently receiving dialysis treatment, and you had to have been dialysis for a minimum of 3 months. So there's no kidney transplant patients that will be able to take this. And if you're obviously participating in a clinical trial right now for renal replacement therapy device, you would not be able to participate in this survey. We have a huge acknowledgement and thanks to all of our partners who are helping us field this survey and make sure that patients understand that they have an opportunity to participate. AAKP, American Kidney Fund, Home Dialyzers United, and National Kidney Foundation have been our patient organization partners. And then U.S. Renal Care has been our partner as we think about fielding this survey in the dialysis unit or with additional kind of home dialysis patients. You know, this work could not be done both without that leadership team that I referenced early and as well as kind of these partnerships that we have in place through the Kidney Health Initiative. This is really a community-wide effort that we want to make sure that all patients have the opportunity, if they would like, to be one of those 400 individuals who've completed the survey. So to date, we have obviously finalized the research question, focusing in on dialysis, wearable dialysis device, thinking about the methodology that we would use. We've developed protocols, we've done environmental scans. We interviewed patients to refine the patient preference information and understand which attributes of the devices would be most important. We drafted the survey and finalized that through a number of different means, and we are currently fielding the survey. There are some publications, if you're interested in this topic or interested in learning more, they can be found on the Kidney Health Initiative website. They are open access. If you're interested in the AAKP is welcome to share those links with all of you. So we've accomplished, since November of 2019, we've accomplished quite a bit. So in summary, this project was included in the Advancing American Kidney Health Initiative work plan. We are obviously focusing on this as a pilot, but it's a critical step in really understanding how to collect patient preference information in an ongoing perspective. The survey, as I've mentioned multiple times, is in the field, and our results will be available in 2022. Anyone who's participated in the survey and is interested in receiving the results, we will send them to them directly, but then also we'll put it in the public domain for anyone that's interested. So again, thank you for the opportunity to participate in the session today. For more information on this project or other projects of the Kidney Health Initiative, please visit the website, www.kidneyhealthinitiative.org. My colleagues, Mark Lim, Megan Malley, or myself, we're happy to answer any questions, and also encourage you, if you're interested in this project, to reach out to Diana or any of the leaders at AAKP. Thank you again.
Thank you, Melissa, for that excellent presentation. AAKP is proud to be a partner in this research project. Now I'd like to welcome Dr. Dahlerus to present.
On behalf of my colleagues, I want to thank the AAKP board and AAKP members for inviting me to present on our patient life goals study. This work would not be possible without the support and expertise of my colleagues and our study team, CMS, and the patients that have participated throughout the development process. This slide lists my disclosures. So I am employed by the University of Michigan, and this patient life goal study was supported through contracts with the CMS. Today, I'll start with a little background of the Life Goals Patient Reported Outcome Measure, and then I'll spend some time talking about our patient partners that have been involved in survey development of the Patient Life Goals survey. I'll talk about our field and full validation testing of the Life Goals Patient Reported Outcome Measure, and then I'll end with a few key takeaways. There were several motivations driving the development of the Patient Life Goals Patient Reported Outcome Measure. Through interviews and a 2017 technical expert panel, we heard from patients and providers they were not very satisfied with patient-reported outcome surveys that were in use, such as those asking about satisfaction with care and quality of life. They expressed concerns about the length and burden of existing patient surveys and not being sure how their responses were being used to improve their care and experience. Providers also questioned the actionability of these survey data. This feedback set the basic framework for the 2017 technical expert panel discussion of patient-reported outcomes and potential new areas for exploration for survey development. Another motivation is the generally low satisfaction patients have reported about their kidney replacement modality choice. That is, about 1/3 of people with end-stage kidney disease felt their selected modality was not really their choice, or it was not an informed choice. This dissatisfaction is even higher among people that are on in-center hemodialysis. Many people that we spoke to also reinforced how dialysis treatment presents challenges to doing the normal day-to-day activities and other things that are important, whether the ability to work, going to school, doing hobbies, exercise, leisure activities, or being as independent as one wants to be. Different modalities and other adjustments to treatment may help support them pursue personal goals that are important to them. Together, this set the context for discussion at the 2017 technical expert panel, and then their subsequent recommendation for a new patient-reported outcome survey related to patient aspirational life goals. Patients have been at the table for this work from the beginning. Again, the Patient Life Goals PRO was recommended by the technical expert panel in 2017. One of the things of note about that panel is that half the panel consisted of patients and then the other half dialysis providers. So patients were actively involved in discussion and participants throughout the deliberations. Patients and dialysis providers wanted a patient-reported outcome that could inform kidney treatment discussions in a way that placed life goals as a key part of those. So, for example, discussion of a modality that aligns with patients' goals and aspirations, and also emphasizing the importance of dialysis to live versus living to dialyze. In the words of one of the panel members, putting dialysis treatment in service to supporting patient life goals where treatment must be in service to what patients want. As a result, the TEP recommendation led to the development of draft items for the Patient Life Goals survey. Patients continued their participation in our subsequent focus groups and additional testing of the survey over the last 4 years. So on the next few slides, I'm going to share some of the feedback that we got from our patient participants on the focus groups as well as through cognitive interview testing. First off, I want to just give an overview of the Life Goals survey itself and the types of questions that are included. Life goals are personal goals that you think are important to achieve. This may include the ability to work, go to school, be independent, spend time with family, or travel, or other things that are important to do. Life goals are defined by each individual. In developing the survey, we respected what we heard from patients. The Patient Life Goals survey is short. It's a total of 8 items in the final version. It asks the respondent to list their life goals, whether their dialysis facility care team talks with them about life goals, and then who on their care team talks with them about life goals. The objective of the survey is to encourage the care team to ask their patients about life goals so that treatment, such as modality type, including transplant, as well as dialysis schedule, can be best tailored to help the person meet their life goals. Most of the feedback from the patient focus group related to wording and plain language understanding of survey items. For example, making it accessible to people at different reading levels. One of the main comments from patients as well as providers was to simplify wording and define terms. For example, define dialysis care team, which we did on the final survey. They also suggested avoiding using technical terms and to use active voice in wording of questions. Participants also emphasized the importance of making the administration of the survey anonymous so that the dialysis facility care team does not know how individual patients responded. As a result of this feedback from the focus groups, we made several revisions and further refinements to the survey before moving on to cognitive interview testing. In 2019, we did cognitive interviews with 13 patients and 10 dialysis providers. And the survey that we used at the time had 9 items, and we tested all of these again for wording and plain language understanding. One important thing that we want to highlight is in recruiting patients to participate in the cognitive interviews, we received over 60 patient volunteers for the cognitive interviews. And this was a result of support and recruitment efforts by patient organizations like AAKP and the NKF and others. We received strong support from patients for the question content, so the wording of questions, as well as the concepts presented in the survey, as well as the brevity of the survey. The next slide provides some specific examples of what we heard from patients in the individual cognitive interviews. Feedback from patients mainly related to wording in the introduction, the list of life goals, and the 6 core survey items. For example, several participants felt the term dialysis patient was potentially off-putting because it suggests dialysis defines someone's whole identity. They suggested using a person on dialysis to reinforce the autonomy of the individual person as separate from their dialysis treatment. Other feedback that we got was on the set of items asking about whether the care team talks with them about their life goals. The patient participants said this should be reworded to allow participants to respond based on their interaction with an individual member of their care team or some or all members of their care team. So for example, in some cases, it's the social worker or the patient care technician that may be the one who talks with the patients most about life goals. Several suggested adding patient care technician to the list of care team members as well. And this list originally included the kidney doctor, nurse, social worker, and dietitian. In other words, the formal care team as defined by regulation in CMS's conditions for coverage of dialysis facilities. Finally, a few participants suggested adding family members to the list of care team members because they consider them part of their care team. And much like what we heard from the focus groups, patients supported anonymous administration of the survey. This is because trust of facility staff can be an issue for many dialysis patients. Some felt that patients would not be candid completing the questions asking whether care team members talk with them about life goals because a negative response could invite a bad or uncomfortable dynamic with their care team members. So I'm going to talk a little bit about data from our field and full validation testing. I'll begin with just briefly describing the scope of field testing and what's involved in full validation testing. The purpose of field testing is to ensure the individual survey items are suitable for the survey, namely that they are accurately capturing the main concept about life goals and contribute to measuring to what degree the dialysis facility care team is talking about a person's life goals as part of treatment planning. Full validation testing is then the next stage of patient-reported outcome measure testing. The way we are doing this for this survey is by asking participants to complete an initial survey and then 2 follow-up surveys at 3 and 6 months. This is an important step and gives us valuable information to make sure that over time we can observe general stability in people's scores as well as changes in responses where expected due to, for example, a change in their health status, or a notable life event like divorce, marriage, or death of a spouse or family member. In other words, we want to observe some change over time when expected, but we also want to see that responses are pretty stable, absent a major change in someone's health or life circumstances, whether they're positive or negative changes. In addition, we want to see how well the survey is associated with other patient-reported outcomes, where we expect life goals to be related to other concepts like quality of life. So in order to do this, we also ask people to fill out a few other short PRO surveys as part of our validation testing. So I'll start by sharing some highlights from our field testing of the Life Goals survey. The survey was field tested in June 2020, and we collected data through December 2020. The survey was available online, or participants could take it over the telephone with myself or another member of the study team, or they could request a paper survey and mail it back to us. We achieved our targeted number of completed surveys, which was to have at least 500, if not more. This is important because we needed at least 500 for the analyses that we needed to do on the questions. AAKP, NKF, and other patient organizations, as well as several dialysis providers, were instrumental in supporting recruitment efforts and our data collection success. For example, they marketed the survey to their members via email and social media. I'll highlight some of the results from our field testing. We completed preliminary and reliability validity analyses in January of 2021, so earlier this year. We had a total of 519 participants that had completed valid surveys that we used for testing. Well over a majority of these were completed through the online portal, about 481, and then the rest were completed either by paper or telephone. The average age of people who took the survey was about 61 years of age. Little over 9% of participants reported their ethnicity as Hispanic. 18% of participants were Black or African American, and 70% of participants were white. 48% of respondents were female, and 42% reported having a college degree or higher. The average time to complete the survey from start to finish was 2.5 minutes. The analyses that we did on the question items showed very strong properties of the core survey items, and this is really what we wanted to see. We found preliminary reliability and validity supported. There was very good internal consistency among each of the survey items, and known groups validity was supported, meaning that we expected individuals on home dialysis would have more positive responses or better scores compared to individuals on in-center dialysis, and this is what we found in our analysis. Based on the testing, the final patient life goals survey includes 2 facility-based scores and 1 individual-based score. The first score tells us how well a facility is doing in discussing life goals with patients. This is the main quality assessment. For example, facility scores between 41 and 59 are close to the average score, and a facility scoring in this range is performing similar on average to many of its peers. But if a facility receives a score on the measure of, say, a 30, then that facility is not doing as good a job talking about life goals with their patients and are worse than most of their peer facilities. The next facility score reports the percentage of patients that responded that at least one treatment team member discusses life goals with them. We want this percentage to be higher versus than lower. And the third score is just an individual level score that is the list of life goals of the patient. This is the only individual patient response the facility will receive directly, so that they can use the list of life goals to facilitate discussions between the patient and their treatment team. The facility will not receive responses to any of the other survey items. Right now, we're in the stage of collecting multiple rounds of data for full validation testing, including longitudinal testing. This includes the initial life goal survey, as well as a few other surveys to validate the life goals measure. We started collecting data in April of this year and will continue collecting data through November 2021. We are collecting a baseline survey and then 2 follow-up administrations at 3-month intervals in order to support longitudinal testing. Again, AAKP and other patient organizations have been very supportive in ongoing recruitment for participants to take the surveys and will help ensure the data collection target that we need for this survey, which is about 300 to 600 completed surveys. And our current status as of August 30th was 423 completed baseline surveys so far. So we're really excited that we've at least exceeded well over 300 and anticipate receiving more surveys over the next few weeks. Our next steps are to complete data collection and then to conduct additional testing in early 2021. And then the patient life goals measure will be ready to submit to CMS by September of 2022. I'm going to conclude by highlighting some key takeaways that highlight the central role of patient research participation from the beginning of the Patient Life Goals study. First off, engaging patients early in measure development is important to make sure that we're capturing concepts and outcomes that are important to them. In this work, patients have been at the table from the beginning, whether through individual interviews, the 2017 Technical Expert Panel, focus groups and cognitive interview testing, and then the pilot and longitudinal testing that we've been doing over the last year. The success of development and testing of the Patient Life Goals Survey is attributed to patients' involvement in this effort. They provided the concept as well as feedback on specific survey content. They've supported recruitment and longitudinal testing of the survey. Their involvement is ensuring that the survey is capturing what is important to patients and will give information to their dialysis care providers to help best align treatment to patient life goals. A related takeaway is the importance of establishing and maintaining relationships with patient organizations. In our work, we engaged the major national kidney patient organizations, AAKP and NKF, and others early on. The organizations have supported us by disseminating information about measure development expert panels, specifically including the patient-reported outcome work, and they've encouraged their members to participate on those panels as well as throughout other stages of measure development. This includes their participation in the focus groups and cognitive interviews for the Patient Life Goals measure. Their recruitment support and participation in the current longitudinal testing of the Patient Life Goals Survey will again ensure the success that we're able to achieve in collecting the data to appropriately test the measure. I've highlighted some of the many ways patients have been involved in this project, which has been crucial to the ongoing development of the Patient Life Goals measure. I want to thank our patient and provider partners, CMS, Dr. Joseph Masana, Dr. Noel Carlozzi, Katrina Price, Dr. Michael Callan, Dr. Richard Hirth, Jen Miner, Wei Zhang, and our entire Patient Life Goals study team.
Thank you, Dr. Dahlerus, for that excellent presentation. AAKP is proud to be a partner in your Patient Life Goals research project. I would like to turn it over to our next speaker, Dr. Gordon.
Hi, I'm Elisa Gordon. I'm a professor at Northwestern University in Chicago, Illinois. I'd like to thank the AAKP for the wonderful opportunity to present to you all. I have no financial relationships to disclose. Today, I'm going to talk about patient engagement in research. Specifically, I'd like to share some general information about what patient engagement means, and then talk about some of my experiences in including patients in all stages of my research. So what is patient engagement? Patient engagement can be defined as the meaningful involvement of patients, caregivers, clinicians, and other healthcare stakeholders throughout the entire research process, from planning the study to conducting the study and disseminating the study results. Patients are so important to work with in research because patients are the experts of their disease. They have the lived experience of their condition. So knowing about patients' experiences of having and living with the condition is valuable to make sure that the research is designed in a way that makes sense to patients and addresses patients' needs. So there's a good rationale for doing engaged research. In addition to what I just mentioned, here are a couple additional points. There's a moral or ethical goal of empowering participants, and that's to help ensure or promote civically responsible research. Another goal is to ensure that the validity or design or applicability of the research itself is effective. There is a continuum in which researchers can engage patient stakeholders in research. You'll see that the last two rows at the bottom of this diagram show how patient stakeholders can be engaged in relatively short-term ways, such as by participating in interviews or focus groups, which typically last about 1 or 2 hours. Now, if you look above the horizontal line moving upwards, you'll see in purple the roles for stakeholders become more and more involved in the research. Importantly, the power dynamic between the research team and the patient stakeholder differs depending on where along this continuum, vertically speaking, the research team and the patient stakeholders are. In other words, if patient stakeholders are co-leading the study, like at the top, then they would share equal power in decision-making over the study as the research co-leader. But if patient stakeholders are sharing their knowledge, say by participating in interviews, then the research team leader is ultimately in charge of all decisions over the study. These different relationships present different pros and cons to stakeholder researchers and stakeholders. In my experience, I've worked with the bottom three options, running community advisory boards, conducting focus groups, and interviews, and I will share some of those examples in a moment. But first, I'd like to highlight some of the principles of patient and community engagement. I'd like to point out how there are principles that researchers live by when doing patient engagement or community engagement or even consumer engagement. While this particular set of principles is advanced by Northwestern's Center for Community Health for the purposes of community engaged research, they share an underlying theme with other types of engaged research, and that is about fostering empowerment among the group that the researcher is working with. So just to give you a couple examples here with regard to collaboration, one example may be meaningfully and mutually working towards partnerships' shared vision. With regard to respect, that can mean recognizing the validity of diverse perspectives, cultures, priorities, and needs. With regard to equity, that could be building on partner strengths and assets. Regarding transparency, that could entail having clear, frequent, and honest and open communications. With regard to impact, that could entail enabling findings to be shared with partners and stakeholders so that they too can use them. Patient input is valuable for improving research in many ways. One article on this topic summarized the ways that patients were engaged in research across over 100 studies. And the article found that when patients served as consultants and collaborators to the research team, they helped to determine the study design, selecting study outcomes, tailoring the interventions to meet the patient's needs and preferences, and enrolling participants. Many articles have reported that patient engagement provided valuable contributions to the research feasibility, acceptability, the rigor, and the relevance. There are a number of benefits of patient engagement. I'm just going to highlight a couple of these. Just at the real high level here, patient engagement has really helped to enhance the quality of healthcare. It's also been very helpful to improve health and treatment outcomes. And it's also really valuable that all of the input that patient engagement provides is helpful in the sense of being able to be shared with the community as well so that everyone can benefit. Now I'd like to showcase a few examples from my research of engaging patients in research. At the bottom of the chart I had showed before, I extensively engage kidney transplant candidates and recipients in interviews and focus groups to learn about their perspectives on a particular topic. I've collaborated with the AAKP to conduct interviews with transplant candidates several years ago, and that was about research on donated organs to inform policy about informed consent. And the AAKP leadership, Richard Knight and Paul Conway, were also involved in reviewing drafts of the survey instrument and the manuscript. And as you can see here on this slide, they were co-authors of the article that we published. Beyond assessing the knowledge and attitudes and beliefs of our patient participants, I've also engaged patients to better understand how to conduct my research and to do it more effectively. So, for example, I'm currently funded right now by the National Institutes for Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases to develop a chatbot. And that's a mobile app that simulates human conversation in order to help living donor candidates of African ancestry to learn about APOL1 genetic testing. I'm in the midst of conducting focus groups among African American living donors and the Chicago community members to identify how to make this chatbot better oriented to the information needs of living donors and on how to make the chatbot more culturally sensitive. And last weekend, we ran our first focus group. There were 7 people scheduled, but only 3 showed up. And low participation rates, that's one of the challenges that researchers face, but we still learned important information on how to improve this chatbot. I'm partnering with the National Kidney Foundation of Illinois, and together we received a seed grant from Northwestern's Center for Community Health to develop a community advisory board. And this is for the same NIH study that I just described about genetic testing of living donors. Altogether, there are 8 of us on the Community Advisory Board, or CAB for short, and we meet monthly for about 1 to 2 hours each month. I prepare the agenda with PowerPoint slides, and the original plan was to have in-person meetings, but due to COVID, we're meeting by video conference call instead. Not meeting in person makes it harder to connect with people on an interpersonal level. And that connection is so critical for developing rapport and trust to be able to engage in the complex discussions that we need to have. And that's especially important in the context for my study, which deals with sensitive matters pertaining to race and ethnicity. Fortunately, we have all gotten along really well, and we've learned so much from each other so far. Some of the questions that I've asked the CAB have included the following things, like how can we improve the informed consent form? And like what kinds of questions do you think living donors might have when we recruit them into our study? Because we want to be able to anticipate those questions in advance in order to be better prepared in answering them. So their feedback gave us the idea to develop a question and answer document for the research staff in order to have that handy to address the potential study participants' concerns. And hopefully that can make the recruitment process run more smoothly. Another question that I posed to the CAB was, when we get further along in the recruitment stage, we may ask them questions like, can you help us to troubleshoot why we have low recruitment rates? And they might have ideas as to what we can do to improve our recruitment approach. As I just alluded to, nothing in research is smooth sailing. There are always challenges. So I'm going to highlight some of the challenges that can occur with engagement research. So for example, it takes a lot of time to build relationships and trust. If you have a CAB, a community advisory board, the members may be more or less engaged. Some people might even leave. If they leave, then you'll need to take the time to bring those new members up to speed. Another challenge is that patients may not know about the science and the methods used to guide the study. But the good news is that there are always solutions. For example, in relation to the last point about building up foundational knowledge about science and methods, several of my early community advisory board meetings were devoted to co-learning. This was a two-way street. So while I led the teaching on the science of this study, my CAB members shared their insights with me about African American concerns about health and trust in the healthcare system. I want to end on a positive note. Learning about science is important and can take some time if one is going to be involved in doing it. It's really important. Fortunately, there's a free training program available online for community members to get certified in the responsible protection of human research subjects. I provided the link here at the bottom. So just so you know, if you're interested in pursuing that certificate, It takes about 2 to 3 hours to complete that program, and most of my CAB members have taken this training. I'd like to conclude by emphasizing that it's really important for research teams to include patients in the development of research studies, in the research conduct, and in the analysis process. This engagement is so valuable for improving, ultimately, patients' education or treatment or care or policy overall. And so I wanted to encourage everyone to get involved and to collaborate. I'd like to thank you all so much for listening. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. You can contact me by email. You'll see my email and my office phone number are both listed below. So I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon, for that excellent presentation. Next, I'd like to welcome Dr. St. Peter.
Hello, everybody. I'm so honored to be here and been asked by the AAKP to give this presentation today. I'm being kind of the spokesperson for the initiative Advancing Kidney Health Through Optimal Medication Management. And today I'm going to focus on patient perceptions of pharmacists' role in their healthcare. I'm Wendy St. Peter. I am a pharmacist and also a professor at the College of Pharmacy, University of Minnesota. I have to acknowledge my team. It took a large team to get all the information together that I'm going to present from a survey. So thanks to all my team for helping out to make this presentation today possible. Today, what I'm going to talk about is how healthcare is changing for patients with kidney disease and why that is. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Advancing Kidney Health Through Optimal Medication Management Initiative, or the acronym is ACHOME, and how we are using the patient voice to help us design and implement our initiative. The patient voice was very important in the survey that we sent on patients' perceptions of pharmacists' role in their healthcare. And I'm going to be presenting that data through this presentation. And at the end, I'm going to talk to you about some key takeaway messages. So as I said, there's a new type of kidney care coming. There's all kinds of forces out there that are being an impetus for change. And one of them is the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The government has recognized that kidney disease is expensive, and there's a lot of associated conditions with kidney disease, such as diabetes, high blood pressure, all of which contribute to things like heart attacks, strokes, infections that patients with kidney disease oftentimes experience. And they want to reduce the impact of kidney disease. We know that because patients with kidney disease have all kinds of related conditions, oftentimes they have numerous medication problems because many patients have complex medication regimens, a high pill burden. For instance, patients that have chronic kidney disease that aren't on dialysis take on average of about 15 pills per day. Transplant patients up to 27 to 29 pills per day, especially in the post-transplant period. Many times patients have lots of doctors because of those multitudes of conditions, and that sometimes results in potentially inappropriate medications being prescribed by physicians that aren't talking to one another. Many patients have told us they have medication access issues. Medications may not be formulary, or they can't afford their medications. And of course, with multitudes of medications come side effects, sometimes things like allergic reactions, those adverse drug reactions. And also, when people are taking lots of medications, they don't know why they're taking them all the time. They might not be able to afford, or they have access issues. There's medication adherence problems, which mean that health-related health goals may not be met. So some of CMS goals or Medicare's goals is to decrease the number of patients who develop end-stage kidney disease. And for those that do, Medicare would like to see increased use of home dialysis, where the patient can dialyze in the convenience of their home, and more patients going to kidney transplant. And one of their big goals is also to decrease health disparities through incentives in these new CMS payment models. But obtaining these goals require a number of things. The first and foremost is patient empowerment. Without patient empowerment, we will not be able to achieve good healthcare goals in this kidney disease area. And it's going to require involvement of other healthcare professionals, because right now we have a nephrology practitioner shortage. So there's not enough nephrologists to see every patient with chronic kidney disease or kidney disease in general. And we have a looming nephrology nurse shortage coming up. And so there has to be other professionals. And what I'm going to be talking today is the pharmacist becoming part of the care team. We also need better care coordination to help patients optimize diet, their fluids, medication management, to meet their individual health goals. And also addressing mental health issues is another big issue. So goals will be hard to achieve without including pharmacists on the healthcare team to reduce patient barriers, to manage their medications in the best way for them to achieve their healthcare outcomes. It's because of this that a number of stakeholders, including pharmacists and patients and nephrologists, have developed the Advancing Kidney Health through Optimal Medication Management Initiative. Our vision is that every person with kidney disease receives optimal medication management through team-based care, including a pharmacist, to ensure their medications are safe, effective, and convenient for them to use. And as part of our mission, in order to accomplish that vision, we know we need to engage pharmacists, and we've engaged key stakeholders, and the primary key stakeholders are patients, to develop partnerships for optimal medication management to improve health outcomes, as well as to reduce healthcare costs. I'm so excited to tell you that we have incorporated the patient voice from the beginning of our initiative. We recognized that having patients involved from the get-go was going to be instrumental in making sure that our initiative met patients' goals. And one of the first things that our patient engagement group decided is we needed to have a survey to determine what kidney patients' perceptions were of pharmacists as a member of the healthcare team. There isn't any information out there on that. And so the American Association of Kidney Patients, as well as Home Dialyzers United and Medical Education Institute, agreed to send our survey out to their members. And 782 people filled out the survey. And if you were one of those people, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Who filled out the survey? Well, most were greater than 55 years old. More were female. Most were white. You can see we had a small group of Black, Hispanic, and Asian patients who responded. And I have to tell you that in these areas, if we're going to change, healthcare in a good way, we need voices from communities that are suffering from disparity in kidney disease. And that includes the Black, Hispanic, Native Indian populations. So the majority of people that filled out the survey were chronic kidney disease patients who are not on dialysis. You can see about 23 to 22% were in-center hemodialysis, or those with a kidney transplant. And then a lower percentage were those with peritoneal dialysis or on home dialysis. But that's a pretty fair number, considering only 10% of patients that dialyze are on peritoneal dialysis or home dialysis. So we were happy with those numbers. The first question we asked patients was, what is the type of pharmacy you use? And you can see the two predominant types of pharmacy are the retail chain pharmacies and the mail order pharmacies. Much fewer percent of patients used clinic-based pharmacies or independent pharmacies. And when I mean independent pharmacies, that means pharmacies that just focus strictly on pharmacy and medications, and unlike retail chain pharmacies, which of course have cards and sell candy and cigarettes and things, so that the pharmacy is not their main operation. We also wanted to know what the main source of medication information was for patients with kidney disease. Not surprisingly, the nephrologist came out first and the primary care physician second. But I was really happy to see that the pharmacist plus nephrologist, the pharmacist plus the primary care physicians, and just pharmacists alone were also main sources of medication information. If we're going to change and optimize medication management, the pharmacist needs to be a bigger factor. And I hope that someday when we repeat this survey that we see a lot higher percentage of patients that recognize the pharmacist plus their other care, other providers like their nephrologists and PCP are both sources of medication-related information. We asked patients, were you unsure who to ask about medications? And really, I think sadly, 20% of patients across patient types were unsure of who to ask about medications. And I'm here to tell you today, your pharmacist is the person to ask. Pharmacists have lots of education between undergraduate college plus pharmacy school, and many now go on to do advanced either specialty practice or primary care practice for an extra 2 years of residency experience. And so pharmacists are those that you ask. If you're ever unsure, ask your pharmacist. We also asked, I know what each of my medications do. Now, this is such an important question because if patients don't know what their medications do, they're less likely to take their medications. And so you can see that chronic kidney disease patients that are not on dialysis, just over 20% said they strongly agreed that they knew what their medications do, which is very scary. About 60% of transplant and home hemodialysis patients strongly agreed they knew what each of their medications did. But honestly, we need 100% of patients or their care partners to understand what the medications do, because if you don't understand what your medications do, again, people are less likely to take them. We also asked if patients were positive that they took their medications right. Again, we saw that just over 30% of chronic kidney disease patients not on dialysis said that they were positive that they took each medication right. And you see, again, home hemodialysis patients and transplant patients were more likely to feel positive that they were taking them right. But as I noted before, we need 100% of each of these patient types to know that they're taking their medications right. And that is because we want each patient to meet their medication-related goals in their healthcare. We asked, do you consider the pharmacist where you get prescriptions to be part of your team? And actually, I was surprised at the high percentage of patients of each type, except for home hemodialysis, that noted that the pharmacist was part of their team. I was actually surprised, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. We did go on to ask patients if they didn't feel that the pharmacist was part of their team, why? It's very sad for me as a pharmacist to see this, but 44% said no interaction was initiated by the pharmacist. 12% said the pharmacist was too busy. Some said that the interaction wasn't helpful or the pharmacist wasn't competent. I think it's not as surprising knowing where patients are getting their medications. So from the retail chain pharmacies, as well as from mail order pharmacies. Of course, mail order pharmacies, there isn't going to be an interaction initiated by the pharmacist because the patient themselves have to initiate any interaction. But especially in retail practice, our pharmacists are oftentimes slammed to the wall with just all their other duties of simply getting those prescriptions out. And there's a lot of pressure from those retail chains for the pharmacists to dispense as many prescriptions as possible, just for the bottom line for the company. So I'm here to tell you that if you have experienced those things in your pharmacy, then you need to find another pharmacy. We have retail chain pharmacies out there as well as independent pharmacies that do enhanced services. That mean they meet with patients, they may do a medication review, they may focus on diabetes or high blood pressure management and monitoring, and they will oftentimes give a plan to you as well as to your physicians. And that's the type of pharmacy that you want to get your medications prescriptions from if you can, because those are the pharmacists that will learn who you are and they will be aware of what your medications are and can communicate information between not only your physicians but also back to you so everybody's on the same page. Relating to the team-based care, we asked the question, my pharmacist works with my nephrologist. And if you notice, the vast majority of all patient types said either no or they were unsure. So I go back to the previous slide that we saw, that a lot of you, or a lot of patients that answered the survey, said their pharmacist was part of their team. But being part of a team means that each one of those team members interacts with one another. So the pharmacist interacts with the physicians, either primary care, nephrologists, or others. And all of those practitioners are aware of what you, the patient, are taking and communicate with each other. So to be part of a true team, there has to be communication with the patient in the center and all the other team members communicating. And oftentimes, pharmacists are a perfect conduit of communication for medication-related information between the patients and their physicians or other healthcare providers. And so we want to make sure with our initiative we're addressing this, and that, again, in another survey, we have 100% of patients say, my pharmacist is working with my nephrologist or my other physicians. We asked, have you ever had a bad experience or side effect with your medications? In other words, did you have an adverse drug reaction? And not surprisingly, given the number of medications that kidney patients take, a large proportion of patients said yes. So in the case of a home hemodialysis patients and transplant patients, over 50% said they'd had a bad experience or a side effect. So we asked patients to explain a little bit more, and we kind of grouped these adverse drug reactions into either patients didn't provide any details, so about 38% did not, but 45% of patients indicated they'd had a mild to moderate reaction, and then 17%, so 17 out of 100 patients said they had a life-threatening or severe reaction. This is why pharmacists need to be involved. We want to prevent any adverse drug reactions, but we know that patients will have side effects, but we can mitigate those and also work with patients to make sure you get the right medications you need that you can tolerate. So that's really essential. We want to make sure that, for instance, if we get this question again, that much fewer patients have reactions. As a follow-up, we asked, has your pharmacist ever prevented or resolved a bad experience with medications? And you can see somewhere on average of about 20% of patients across all patient types noted that the pharmacist had resolved a bad experience. And I think as having pharmacists as members of the healthcare team in patients with kidney disease, you'll see that percentage go up much higher. I want to summarize what I've talked about here today and what the results from the survey to say that pharmacists bring value, because pharmacists can empower patients to take charge of their medication-related goals by making sure their medications are safe, effective, and convenient for them to use. They can help patients resolve their med problems and prevent medication problems. Importantly, they can work to improve medication adherence by reducing, barriers such as cost barriers, formulary barriers, having patients understand why they're taking each medication and how to take it right. All of those things improve medication adherence, which then improves outcomes and health outcomes. They also address barriers to medication use, as I told you, some cost barriers, formulary barriers, maybe barriers to taking certain types of medications like tablets or capsules if they're too big, those sorts of things. And in that way, pharmacists can help reduce disparities. We know that our Black and Brown Americans oftentimes aren't getting the same preventative medication to reduce kidney disease progression as white patients are, and that needs to change, and pharmacists can help out with that. Pharmacists are also helping in the COVID-19 crisis by getting patients vaccinated, and that's been true for dialysis patients as well as chronic kidney disease patients. So some key takeaway messages are that we have many forces out there, the government, kidney care companies, health systems, and just, practitioners themselves that are working to improve kidney disease care. But improvement in patient-centered healthcare won't change without patient input. I'm just, again, proud that our initiative is including patients at every step. Patients are helping us inform our strategies, our communication, as well as pharmacist training to make sure that we do the best that we can do to address problems that patients have, not that problems that we think they have. Ultimately, why are we doing this? Is because we want to ensure safe and effective medication. I want to thank all of you who have listened to this today. And if you're excited about this initiative to optimize medication management, I'd like you to become involved in our initiative. And if you are interested, please contact me at my email address. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. St. Peter. AAKP is proud to be a partner in your research project to demonstrate the important role pharmacists can play within the healthcare team. As I come from a family with many transplants, I can tell you the pharmacist's role is critical. For our final speaker, I'd like to welcome Ms. Broderick.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Broderick from Pcori. Thanks to the American Association of Kidney Patients for having me here today as part of this panel. I look forward to speaking with you all. I'll start today by sharing a little bit about Pcori. We have had the pleasure of presenting at the National Patient Meeting a number of times, so we know that many folks in the audience are already familiar with us. And some of you are already deeply involved with Pcori in a variety of ways. So some of what I share may be familiar to some of you, but I wanted to start by grounding the conversation since there are a number of people in the audience who don't know us as well. And for our old friends, hopefully I'll be sharing some new information that you haven't heard from my other colleagues and that you will find useful in your work, especially as I get into some of what we have learned about engagement and some of our newer resources. Pcori was built on the foundation that patients and other stakeholders must be at the table at every stage if we are to have meaningful research that people can trust and people can use to make important healthcare decisions. The evidence-based information we promote comes from research that is guided by patients, caregivers, and the broader healthcare community. In short, we are working to change the culture of research to be more patient-centered, which is a goal I know that we all share. Pcori funds research on high-impact, high-cost health conditions. We have funded more than 1,800 studies in 49 states, plus DC and Puerto Rico. You'll see chronic kidney disease on this list here on the left, and we actually have updated numbers that aren't yet on this slide. So Pcori has now funded 23 studies on chronic kidney disease, investing $94 million. Whether you're familiar with our research or not, the Pcori Kidney Disease Spotlight is a great place to get a big picture view of the work that we're funding across the kidney portfolio and the important questions that this research is exploring. For example, the pros and cons of different treatment options, how well certain kinds of treatments work, especially for people with chronic kidney disease, and where care and treatment like dialysis is provided. Pcori is working to build a more inclusive research culture within our organization and in the broader research ecosystem at every stage of research. So here you see that engagement across our work goes from identifying research priorities that matter most to patients to changing policy and practice in institutions and clinical practice and everywhere in between. In terms of our funded research, the studies and projects we fund are required to meaningfully engage patients and other stakeholders. And for some teams, this is a new way of approaching their work. We created the Engagement Rubric to provide more practical guidance to study teams on what engagement and partnership can look like throughout the research process. The rubric is grounded in the principles you see highlighted here: reciprocal relationships, co-learning, partnership, trust, transparency, and honesty. In the coming months, we'll be updating and expanding the rubric with a focus on equity and inclusion. One of our goals is to build the capacity of communities, including the kidney community, to partner in research in robust ways, and the Engagement Awards program helps us to do that. There are a number of funded projects that focus on building capacity in the kidney community to partner in research, for example, by building knowledge of the research process and Pcori, by building infrastructure and online platforms so that researchers can partner with patients and communities, and working together to identify research priorities that are important to patients and guide future Pcori. I know some current and past engagement awardees are in the audience today, and we encourage others of you to explore these projects and explore these funding opportunities on our website. Pcori has now been around for long enough that we have seen some really interesting learnings emerge about engagement, which I'd like to share with you. For the last 10 years, we've studied engagement of patients and stakeholders in virtually every aspect of what we do, and we've developed a body of evidence that is helping to answer important questions about engagement. This information comes from the projects we fund, from outside studies and evaluations, and is also grounded in the experience of Pcori staff, of engagement officers like myself, who work directly with study teams that are doing engaged research. In one recent study, there were 400 distinct examples of how engagement influenced studies across 58 Pcori projects. This study included interviews with researchers and partners and gave us a more in-depth understanding of how and what influence engagement has had in Pcori-funded projects. We have seen in our research something that you all know from personal and direct experience, that there are different ways partners can influence or impact a study. For example, partners might refine or modify different aspects of a study, like outreach materials or informed consent materials, to make sure that they are appropriate for a patient audience that the team is trying to reach. Patients can redirect study activities. So, for example, leading the study team to choose new comparators or new outcomes that are of greater significance to patients, all the way to co-producing, where maybe a PI and partners collaborate or may even share leadership to make decisions about important questions or challenges together. And these are all the ways we've seen engagement positively impact research. So when people ask, why should we engage patients in research? And I know we all get this question all the time. This is why. This is the difference it makes. This is not news to most of us who do this work, but our evidence shows that engaging patients helps to make sure the way studies are carried out actually makes sense for participants and matches their needs and preferences so that they are willing to participate in important research and stay involved. Engagement of clinicians and patients can help make sure that a study is feasible, that what a study team is proposing can actually be carried out by the clinicians implementing these studies in their practices. And engagement impacts relevance. At the end of the day, are the study results actually useful to people making important and often very personal decisions about healthcare? For example, comparing treatments that a patient is most likely to encounter in their journey and their decision-making process. These results really show you the strong relationship between engagement and meaningful research, and I hope this information will be useful to help ground and support and confirm the work that you're doing as patient partners, as advocates, as clinicians, and as researchers. Again, this is firsthand knowledge for many of you, but I also wanted to highlight some other research on the value that engagement brings to those who are involved. When we surveyed Pcori research partners, this is what they reported in terms of benefits. For example, for patients, improved skills and the knowledge that you're making a difference for other patients. For communities, improved trust and relationships. And for researchers, a deeper understanding of the populations they're studying and trying to help, and a continued commitment to engagement in their future work. We recognize that sharing and implementing these important learnings about engagement requires training and resources. So next I'll share with you a few materials that we hope will help you and your colleagues and people throughout the kidney community to engage in research. Last year at this meeting, my colleague Lisa talked about research fundamentals. This is a free online training that is designed specifically for patients and other stakeholders who are not scientists to learn the basics of the research process and feel more confident partnering on a research project. So if you're a patient partner looking to get more engaged in research, this is a really great resource to check out. And for other colleagues, this is a great tool to share with your networks and partners. We also just launched a new website called Building Effective Multi-Stakeholder Teams to help researchers and stakeholders build the skills needed to work together better as a team. For example, how to communicate openly and honestly to build trust, how to engage in productive disagreement to identify solutions, and how to share leadership. The Engagement Tool and Resource Repository is a set of tools that were actually developed and used by Pcori awardees, both research studies and engagement awardees. So here you'll find ideas and materials that can help to facilitate engagement in research, for example, including committee charters, evaluation surveys, meeting agendas, and a variety of different tools. Pcori also has an Engagement in Health Research Literature Explorer, which is a searchable catalog for peer-reviewed literature about engagement. So if you're looking for journal articles about engagement related to a particular population or condition, this is a great place to start. The Ambassador Program is a great and flexible way to get involved with Pcori and with other supporters to help change the culture of research. It's also a really great resource and a lively community where a lot of information is shared. We have a number of folks from the kidney community among our ambassadors, and I suspect some of you are in the audience today. If you're not familiar with this program, I highly encourage you to check it out. You can visit our website for more information. Finally, here are links to some other resources that you may find useful, whether you're a patient partner or a clinician who wants to know more about what it's like to partner on a research study, or a researcher looking for guidance around, for example, planning and budgeting for engagement. We are also happy to help guide you toward information you might need, so please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Finally, looking ahead, it is an exciting time at Pcori. Right now, we're undergoing a strategic process to define new national priorities for health and a new research agenda. These are the proposed national priorities that were approved by the Pcori Board of Governors this summer. We have been seeking public and stakeholder input throughout the process, and we expect to have a public comment period on the research agenda later this fall or early in 2020. So stay tuned, and if you'd like to stay updated on this work going forward, or other ways to work with Pcori, please get in touch. So this is my contact information if you'd like to reach out. Please don't hesitate to get in touch. Thanks for listening. It is always our pleasure to join this amazing event and be able to speak and connect with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Broderick. AAKP has been honored to be a recipient of 2 engagement awards and also been represented in all Pcori-funded grants related to kidney disease since inception. Again, thank you to all our panel speakers.